Early memories. It was 1966. The only final that I knew of was the final warning implied in my mother's killer gaze. Life was hard. Well, it was hard for my mum and dad, but for me it just was. I was 5. That's the way things are when you're 5. It must have been around November time, because the mornings were frosty and my mum was grating the ashes out from the fire. I could taste the old ash on my tongue as she ran the poker across the grate, sending out a cloud of grey dust into the air. I was wrapped in a blanket trying to keep warm, but it was next to impossible in that old house. The walls ran with damp and you could smell piss. Piss because it was too cold to make the trip to the outside lavvy. The Kazi, my dad called it. So we all went in the gazunda during the night. It was called the gazunda because it goes under the bed. But during the day it was called the China pot and it smelled of vim. It was Sunday and my dad was frying up kidneys on fried bread in the scullery. Shit on a raft, he called it. That Sunday was special. My dad was going to take me for a hike, a long walk over the Dunstable Downs. He was taking a big rope with us, but didn't tell me why. Mum was staying at home. She wasn't talking. She just had all her teeth out the week before, and her mouth was still swollen and bloody. Plus, she was embarrassed to reveal her newly made old woman face. She must have only been about 29 or 30. They wouldn't fix your teeth for free then, but they would pull them out and give you falsies, so that's what she had to do. Anyway, she said she would be all right once she got her new teeth, and in the meantime we got ready for our walk. We took a flask of hot OXO drink and some bananas. Then my dad bundled as many clothes as he could fit on me, and we left my mum standing by the fire holding up a sheet of yesterday's newspaper to try to encourage it to light. All I remember about the walk there is that my dad had his head down to guard against the wind. He didn't hold my hand the way my mum used to, and I relished in that grown-up feeling of freedom. He strode up the street with a sense of purpose, and I had to trot to keep up with him. Sometimes I had to run. When we finally reached the Downs, I was sure we'd come to the wrong place. This place was full of ups, loads of frost-covered hills. My dad pointed to the highest mound and picked out the shape of an oak tree growing out from a ledge near the top. We're going to climb this huge mountain, he informed me, and have some fun with that tree. Okay. I was game. I would have done anything he said. When we got to the top, he was panting quite a bit. I was thinking it was magic, because even though he didn't have any money for fags that week, he was still smoking. I blew air out from my own mouth, and I could see that I was smoking too. I pointed it out to him, but he just nodded. He didn't seem amazed at all. When we reached the top, we sat for a bit and drank some of the hot OXO drink. I thought it tasted wonderful, like gravy. My dad just smiled and said, yeah. We ate a banana each, and I made mine last as long as I could by squishing it through the gaps in my teeth until it liquefied. I opened my mouth to show him the result. Look, I've made a banana milkshake. He looked. Don't ever let your mum see you do that, he said. Then he got the thick rope out from his bag. He looped it over the branch that jutted out and tied a complicated knot at the end. Then he looped that over the long bit hanging and made a kind of swing effect with it. He pulled it, pitting his weight and all of his strength against the sturdiness of the branch, and when he was satisfied he turned to me grinning. Then he took off all of his clothes except for his underpants. He stood there, steam rolling off his body in waves, a giant of his man. His chest and back full of hair, he looked like a freezing gorilla. Then without warning, he jumped at the rope, grabbing hold of it and wrapping it round his wrist. He held on and ran right off the edge of the hill and yelling at the top of his voice, a great triumphant Tarzan yell. I watched, my mouth open in surprise and silenced for once, just by the sheer majesty of it. After a bit, he stopped and dressed himself. "Right," he said, "now it's your turn." I started to tear at my clothes in my eagerness to get them off so I could have a go, but he stopped me. "No, you keep your clothes on. You'll catch bloody pneumonia. Your mum will feckin' kill me." I thought that was unlikely, seeing as how he was the strongest man in all the world, and Mum was a small woman. She couldn't even climb up a ladder, and she screamed whenever the rats ran out from the scullery. He lifted me up, sat me on the loop of the rope that he'd made. He showed me where to hold on, and kept warning me to not bloody let go. Then he gave an almighty push, and I flew. Afterwards we sat in silence and drank the rest of the Oxo. My dad stood up, brushing the wet from his clothes, and said, "Beat it down the hill." With that he dropped back to the ground and started to roll down the hill. I quickly followed, over and over, tumbling down until I was breathless with laughter and exhilaration. But when we reached the bottom, it was clear that I'd rolled into something. I was covered in wet grass and squashed dog shit. My legs were covered in nettle stings, and I'd lost a welly boot from somewhere. The mood abruptly changed as we both realised there was going to be hell to pay when I finally got home. We had no choice but to go home, though, and we trudged slowly. My dad carried me some of the way because I had nothing on one of my feet, but after a while he said the stink was too bad, so I had to hop. I think the fact that I don't remember the reception that we got on our arrival home speaks volumes. The thing I do remember, though, is the feeling of the wind whistling past my frozen cheeks and the sight of all of Luton and Dunstable laid out before me in miniature as I flew on that makeshift swing. For that small time, I was the queen of the world, and my dad was Tarzan.